Hello again. A while ago, I did a video on counterfact. And for some of you, that may have been a bit of an eye-opener in terms of how our minds can work without us even really knowing what they're doing to see things in a pessimistic or optimistic light. Well, if so, then I might just blow your mind again today with what I'm going to talk about, which is explanatory style. So what is explanatory style? Well, just like counterfact, there is a positive and a negative way of looking at things. And like counterfact, it's sort of a way of explaining what's happened to us. Let me give you a few examples. Let's say your hot water heater broke and your basement has flooded. If you find yourself saying, well, that was just an old water heater, that could be one way to look at it. That would be a positive way to look at it, versus why does stuff like this always happen to me? And if a big presentation at work didn't go very well, you could say, well, they just really weren't that willing to listen. Or you could say, oh, I've just always been horrible at persuading people. Can you start to see the difference between, how explaining the exact same event in these two different ways can affect you? So explanatory style has to do with the story we tell ourselves about an event or an adversity that we've gone through. It's our mind's way of explaining or interpreting events, and so they make sense to us. As I mentioned before, we can do this in a positive way or a negative way. A positive or optimistic explanatory style interprets events as being external to ourselves, transient, so temporary and fleeting, and specific, so localized to this one event. Whereas a negative or pessimistic explanatory style interprets events as being personal, so our fault, permanent, it's always been this way or always will be this way, and pervasive, meaning it's sort of a global event. It's indicative of a larger pattern of things. So let's examine what each of these means. So when we look at an event as being external versus internal, so whether it was outside of us or somehow our fault. It's the difference between they weren't willing to listen and I'm a bad salesman. Or it's a buyer's market versus I'll never be able to sell my house. It puts the fault on you and as such makes you feel a lot worse about yourself if you see it in a pessimistic light. So where possible, try to avoid that. If it's transient versus permanent, this is whether an event was a one-off or a long-lasting, or things have always been this way or will always be this way. It's the difference between I can't sell my house now and I'll never be able to sell my house. Or that was a really rough week I had versus things are never going to let up at work. If you're using words like always and never, watch out. That's sort of the path leading you down to more of a negative view of things. And then specific versus pervasive is whether the event is localized to one thing or part of a larger global pattern of your life. It's the difference between that math problem was really tough and, oh, I'm just not good at math. Or I didn't handle that conversation very well versus I'm a temperamental and horrible person. Right? You can really see how these can sort of take you in different directions. So how do we start to change? If we are noticing some of the negative styles, what can we do? Well, the simple way is when something happens to ask yourself 3 questions and see how you answer those questions and then rework your answers if you want to start changing them. And those 3 questions are very simple. Is it personal? Is it permanent? And is it pervasive? And if you answer yes, then maybe try and change your answer. Let's take a look at that bad presentation example from above. We can sort of use all 3. So was it personal? No, they weren't ready to hear it. Versus, yes, I presented badly, right? So if you're saying yes, then it was probably your fault and you don't want to necessarily be seeing things that way in a general sense. Now, to be fair, maybe this wasn't your best presentation. And if if you can actually are able to look at it objectively and see that, yes, you didn't do things as well as you could have this time around, I mean, that's fine. What we're looking for here is a larger pattern of how you address things in your life. So, was it permanent? No, this was just a bad day. Versus, yes, I've completely lost my presentation skills and I'll never be able to get them back. Right? So we want to go to the no answer in that case, that this was just a one-off. And was it pervasive? No, this was just one presentation. Or, yes, no one will ever listen to me again. Everyone is like this, right? It's the one localized thing versus a larger pattern of events. So remember, if you're explaining things to yourself and you're really taking it personally and imagining things that are permanent and pervasive, then maybe it's time to shift how you think about these things. And if you're having some trouble with that, and if you really want some help, I'm here to chat. So I hoped this helped you shed some light on a little bit more of some of the weird things our minds can do to help us make sense of our lives, but also potentially in a way that can either drag us down or lift us up. So until the next time, I hope you are able to dream big, laugh lots, and create. Take care.